Go. Mm-hmm. All right. Dylan Hardison Badnat. Good. All right. Okay. You're on, Dylan. No bad words.
No bad words. Well, actually, no, I don't use bad language. All right. We're not actually talking yet. I got like 20 minutes. People have 20 minutes. Let's see. Put this on 10. As they said from Incognito Windows. Hi, I'm Dylan. I'll talk about it now. But from the perspective of the turtles are actually really cool and great. It's simple, but see, Pete, I haven't forgotten about you.
Needs to be bigger.
See, Pete scripts.
Larger. Yes.
What size terminal is that end up being? That's too small.
You run an i3?
What?
Like
You run i3?
i5.
i5?
Oh, wait, sorry, i3. Yeah, the lead manager's i3.
I love it.
what operating system are you using tonight?
Arch Linux.
What?
Arch.
Oh, Arch? Okay.
So that's a much smaller terminal. My normal terminal size can be completely unreadable on here, but just for the record, that's my normal font size, which is nice because on this, oops, that's not right. On this screen, it results in, you can't see that number, but you still can't see the number. But it's like 162 by 90, so very big. And we actually want to be, it can be a little bit bigger than that. 84 by 31, still bigger than the historical terminal. Oh, here's something worth looking at. I found myself, this is going to fall into before I get into the Git stuff because I think that these meetings show more conversation about more topics. So, should you find yourself on a machine that is ancient and you're a developer and you're told that you must develop on this machine because the code cannot leave the confines of the company, your first instinct would probably be to use SSHFS, as was my first instinct. And this failed because the connection through the VPN is very slow. It is perfectly fast enough for interactive stuff, but using it is otherwise difficult. So here is something that is now a permanent part of my home directory, which is a very, very dumb script to download and compile a few handful of things that I need and install them to my home directory. So I'm not going to go into the details or the laborious effects of trying to figure this out, although I copied this verbatim from the Arch Linux build script. Well, not quite verbatim. So, should I run into a machine that doesn't have tmux? Should I run into a machine that does not have tmux, I can go, this will probably fail, and it doesn't do anything because it actually is kind of almost a package manager because, what? Oh, I remember the syntax of the script that I wrote yesterday. But meanwhile, while I continue talking, this will happily go and build tmux and install it to its own path in my home directory, which is great because screen sucks. What I mean by screen sucks is if you use our ERXVT Unicode, is that the good font size again, Pete?
That's pretty good.
All right, if you use RxVT Unicode, its term name is, which is perfectly fine. It accurately describes what it supports. It's RxVT Unicode. It supports 256 colors. There's a system called term info that describes, using a variety of things that look like moon language, what capabilities a terminal has. This tells you things like how to make things green, how to move the cursor on the screen, and so on. It's very complicated. But that's what it looks like, the text. It actually stores these in term info files in your in the .term info directory, in your home directory.
Let me interrupt. You said something that I didn't understand before you get too far. What's TMUX?
TMUX is a replacement for screen, which I'm kind of having a little bit of a rambling path here. I'll get to in a second.
Okay.
The reason I mentioned that screen sucks and TMUX is better is because on my terminal, because my terminal string is long, if I type, oh, it's patched on here. I have to, does anyone have an old box I can SSH into? Because I can't SSH into anything work with it. All right, if I have SSH into a machine, Linode, I could do that, but then I'd have the Linode thing on the screen. You happen to memorize your... So when he does this, and he SSHs in into something using an older, unpatched version of screen, what it's going to say is screen is going to refuse to start. It's going to say term too big, like $term too big, which is generally, if any string is too big, especially if it's too big and it's less than 256 characters, probably have a problem. Did it say the screen too big, or did it work? It worked. It worked. They fixed that? It was failing.
Darn it, screen is terrible.
Oh, there we go.
Boom.
There you go. So term too long. That's a stupid error. You shouldn't have to deal with errors. But if I didn't want to install TMUX and I wanted to make this work, there is a way of doing it. If you type infocomp, it outputs the editable version of a term info entry, and you can put it in whatever file you want. Who exists? There we go, your xvt.terminfo. Then you open the file. It's a text file now. And I'm not going to explain how I'm going to do this in Vim, but extra points if you know the key sequence I use. I want to make it a much shorter name, say urxvt. So I will do that.
Oh, it's complaining about that string?
Yes. It's saying that's too long.
BOE is too long. I mean, it's only like 7 or 8 BOE.
Well, it seems to be complaining that
No, the one he's on.
the string...
I didn't do that right, but anyway. So this first thing before the pipe is the name of the term info. So once you have that, you would go tick, which will compile this and put it in your term info directory. Done. So now, I of course did this locally. So what I would do, I can't get back into that box because I logged out of it, is I would just naturally run tick on the remote server and then look, yes, tick, in the directory. And now there's urxvt, so that means if my term is urxvt and I run Vim, Vim is using that definition, which is cool. And I will prove that what that's doing. If it was a thing that didn't exist, like urxvtf, then it's going to say, it doesn't know how to talk to my terminal. So that's how we do it. So in short, if you have a terminal that is too big, you use infocomp. Some kind of short name. And then run tick. And you'll get an infocomp term info entry that is not too big. However, you shouldn't be using screen because screen is riddled with things like term too big and probably has various other problems. So you should use TMUX, which is now finished compiling. So where is TMUX now? TMUX is in, which is really cool. It actually has several other things in there because anything that depended on, I had it installed.
Okay, so TMUX will take these long strings and, not choke them.
TMUX doesn't care. TMUX is actually written in modern C and uses things like string functions that don't have buffer overflows. So what tmux actually does, though, because this is a long line of rants, tmux just lets you have multiple windows over, say, an SSH connection, which is kind of cool. It also lets you detach from it, and then like attach from it somewhere else. Same place, but same basic principle. Which is really good if you're doing development over VPN.
You know, who's
So-
that?
Me?
Well, it's kind of nice to have windows in a text screen.
Yep. Also, that's not even half of it because I should probably attached. I don't think I closed everything. If I actually care to use the mouse, I can choose which window I'm in by clicking on it.
There.
I don't actually ever do that, but it's nice that it's there. tmux. I was just explaining tmux in my situation with why I don't like screen because it thinks my term is too big.
Too small.
No, it thinks my term is too big.
Your text is too small.
Oh.
The camera's not getting it. There.
You didn't really need to see it. I think you could see the lines of the thing that I did. You can also have separate sessions named different things. So you can have Project Foo, which gets truncated down there, but it still really is Project Foo. And then you could like create another window there. You can create a split window there, and then you could go detach from that, and you can create another one. Working on the pants project. And all of a sudden you're working on different ones, so you can go and you can see which ones you have open and switch between them. So, and we're now at time with Vim. So this is my Vim Git talk. Why that means is I wanted to talk about either Vim or Git because I didn't have much else prepared. And I actually did prepare for this. I ran over it about after I got off of work and spent about 30 minutes on it, so we'll see how it goes. I use Git and Vim every day, and lately I've been using them together. I've been using a plugin called Fugitive, which is really cool. You can find more about it on GitHub, on Tim Pope's GitHub, and it's called, that's the pathogen thing that it uses, which you don't need to pay attention to. There's Fugitive. You can get it there. Installing it is something that actually will be another talk because it's boring. Once you figure out how it works, there's a number of ways of doing it. But I happen to have it installed. It's in my Vim bundle Fugitive directory. I renamed things so that they're shorter because I'm obsessively compulsive. So what does Fugitive do? Well, luckily we need, for this to work, I could show you a Git repository. And that could be fun. I could probably show you one of the ones I work on, like the one for the slug site, but that doesn't have very many commits in it. I could show you ones for work. Those have a lot of commits in it, but that would be like against my deployment agreement. So instead, we can use my home directory because that's a Git repository. So what's a Git repository? For the sake of this, I'm not going to talk about implementation details except when they're relevant, and I firmly understand them. But for the sake of argument, a Git repository is something that has a .git directory in it, which my home dir does. So there's a bunch of directories in there which aren't terribly important, and I don't want to screw up things in my actual working home directory. We did that in the previous talk, and that was not fun. So we're going to make a copy of this. So I'm copying my home directory. And it's still at home. And there we go. So nice clean Git directory. This is all the stuff I actually care about. And also, more importantly, every one of these files is actually public because I keep this on this part of my home directory on GitHub. So I don't need to worry about disclosing anything that I shouldn't. And also, if you happen to notice, I still have passwords in there that I haven't banished from the Git history. This will be the opportune time to point that out. But I think, as far as I can tell, they're not. More on how you can do things like that at a later date, that you can rewrite history when you do something stupid. So, to start off, I'm going to imagine there's an imaginary file that I care about. A good file to have in your home directory, some people say, would be a to-do list. This is a very dumb way of keeping track of things. You can still read all of it, right? So there we go. It's our little to-do list. Now, the standard way of doing stuff with Git on the command line, which is the normal way you would use Git, would be add that file, and you commit. Well, you could actually add multiple. I'll point out you could add multiple files and do multiple things, and then commit change files. For right now, the simple case for just adding a file, and you commit. This is all fairly interesting, fairly uninteresting, and you get this thing where you write a message, and that's all well done. But I'm not going to do that. What the hell did I do? Oh yeah, that's right. There we go. So now, this is a little bit weird. Well, we won't pay attention because it's not important. So if I'm in this to-do file, Git doesn't know about it yet, and all of the commands that this fugitive plugin adds are commands that you run in Vim's X mode. If you don't know what X mode is, I'm not going to bother explaining that, but if I hit the colon, my cursor goes down there and I get to type special commands which are not part of the shell. And explain, and I may have confused you more, but nevertheless, so I write gwrite, and nothing apparently happens. But what I've just done, I can see, is I've added a new file. It's really cool. And if I go to that file and I hit minus, I unadd that file. And if I hit minus again, I re-add that file. So if I hit status, I can see all the changes I'm about to commit and all of the changes that I'm not tracking. So if I want to actually commit, I can write gcommit, and it pops me into the window, just like before. But now if I click on minus, it does nothing, because that is the status window. So if I write a message here, I now have a history of that. I now change that file. Again, I don't even have to actually ever exit my text editor, which is good. So I've washed the goats, but now I have to buy more barbed wire. I suppose. So we save it. So when you write, in Vim, you do is :write to write the change. So it's a very easy workflow to get in. Is when you actually want to get this thing so that it's in part of Git or in Git's index, you use gwrite. Now, no, I don't have to commit at this point. I could make other changes, and I can see what those changes are. Because I've already done gwrite, I now can see the differences of what I'm getting ready to commit and what I've already committed. So, Vim has a diff mode that I'm not going to explain because that's another topic. My point in this is to try to show you how to use Git, but in this I realize the dependency trees of other things that you might not need to know, and the best advice I can tell you about those is to completely ignore them. There's a lot of stuff that you don't actually need to know until you need to know. When you do know, you can find that. So if I just hit gwrite and hit type, there's now no differences between what's ready to commit and what's uncommitted, or what's not in the index. So what is an index?
So what's an index?
Index is actually just a listing of files that Git is going to commit in the next commit, and this is what it looks like. Notice this, does this look a bit familiar? That's not entirely conceptually what it is, but the Git index file controls what is going to be committed on the next commit. If I actually do commit it, actually we'll do it the Vim way because I'm trying to show you the Vim way. I'm never going to get used to that. I decided I don't want to do that, and I just want to hit gwrite. So I haven't committed anything, so what happens? I've still modified it?
Well, the file's still modified, and you manually change it.
Yep, and now I've manually
That change.
So oh, I did change the buy more barbed wire. So at this point, when I was confused, what I should have done That's new. There aren't actually any changes that are ready to commit. So, what I actually have to do is tell it that there are no changes to be committed, because we're actually in a state where I can commit it because, even though there's no changes. So now if I say quit, that would go, or quit, that would go. Change is not staged for commit. So on this one, I can't actually commit anything. Note that there's no line above the type of description, which is comments. But what I can do is show you all of the history. We're actually browsing the index now. These are all the files that Git currently knows about. And we can look at them. That is a git ignore file, which tells it things to ignore. More interesting could be my i3 config. And these files these aren't files that actually exist. This is me browsing files that are all packed together in Git's index structure. So back to the reuse case. If I want to see what the index version of this is, the opposite of write, I can do gread. And we now see what the original content was. And I could write that. If I try committing it, or writing it, and then doing the status, it should no longer show up as modified, because it is no longer modified in the working directory or in the index. In general, the only time you add things is when you're getting ready to commit them as one logical set. I frequently, in my normal home directory, will change things throughout the course of a day. And see how I can't read that. And if I pipe it through less, I'll lose all those colors. So what I should do is look at gstatus. And now I can see I have all these files. This is my live home directory, which means I'm not going to touch anything. But, so, if any of these changes are related, most likely the changes to i3 config and i3 status are the same application. So I would want to commit those together. But I wouldn't want to add any changes I made to my Chrome executable or to something that upgrades Java's GL library. Because whatever I change in those are going to be unrelated to the config changes above it. So if I wanted to do that, I'm actually going to break what I said. I'm going to look at what I changed and possibly commit it. So this is the file, and if I was trying to figure out what I wanted to change, how would I do that? Well, I have actually a helpful hint on the line number. Do you see the plus?